I opened my eyes and found myself lying in a field of tall grass. It was clear night, and I looked up and saw unfamiliar stars in the sky above. A deer was sniffing my face, and I felt it gently lick my eyeball with a long forked tongue. I looked at it and saw it had too many eyes. It had 2 rows of 8, for a total of 16, making it look vaguely arachnid. It stuck its tongue out to lick me again, and then I shuffled backwards crab style to get away from it, my eyes wide and terrified. I looked around and saw more of the spider-like deer creatures. They had too many legs and eyes, but otherwise looked like regular deer. They fed on the purple grass and looked at me curiously. I surveyed my surroundings, trying not to panic, and saw there was a small shack in the distance. Puffs of white smoke came from the chimney, and lights glowed inside, indicating someone was home. Getting up, I walked towards the hut, curious but also afraid. I knocked on the door and heard a man's voice from inside telling me to come in. I entered and was somehow not surprised to see Lester sitting in a chair by the fireplace. He looked apprehensive, wringing his hands together nervously. A tall man in a white robe was kneeling before the hearth, poking the flaming logs and teasing out more heat from their embers. He blew on the fire. It flared up and began to glow brightly. Lanterns were set strategically here and there. They looked like the old kerosene ones we used to use up at my cottage. Their flickering lights dimly illuminated the room. It was an old one-hut room, sparsely decorated and plain. The old man turned around and I saw he looked wizardly, with a long white beard and a strange-looking cap to go with his robes. He looked at me patiently and gestured to a wooden chair next to Lester. I sat down in it without saying anything. The man clicked his tongue at us and shook his head, as if he were trying to reprimand a pair of school children who had been misbehaving. "The 2 of you have no idea what you've done, do you?" he asked. His eyes had large bags under them, and he appeared very tired. His weathered face made him look at least 100 years old, maybe more. We both shook our heads no. We opened the gateway. I heard myself saying, remembering what the giant owl had told me in my dream. "A circle gets the square," he exclaimed. "You 2 opened up the damn gateway between the worlds." We looked at him stupidly. He sighed wearily and began to explain. "There are infinite realities, separated by a membrane, you could call it. All of these realities are connected. Every decision you make creates another reality, another you. Over the course of the existence of the universe, this has created infinite realities, all joined together by layers of the same interwoven membrane. The only ones who are supposed to be able to travel between worlds are the overseers." "Is that what you are? An overseer?" I asked. "No. If I was, you would be dead by now. They are looking for you, though. They already know something's wrong with the Great Onion." "The Great Onion?" "You know, layers upon layers, with a thin membrane in between. The universe is essentially a giant onion." The old man looked at us with his hands out, hoping we understood. "I think I get it," I said. "But how do we close the gateway?" "Ask him." The old man pointed to Lester. I looked over at him and saw he looked guilty, like he had done something he wasn't supposed to do. He was looking down at his lap, and beads of sweat ran down the sides of his face. "What did you do?" I asked him, suddenly furious for reasons I couldn't understand. I really didn't like the look on his face and the impatient tapping of his foot. It looked like he was getting a scolding from his parents and was just waiting for it to be over so he could go out and start causing trouble again. "Nothing," he said, his eyes shifting to the side. "Bullshit," I said. Looking back up at the old man, his face changed. It no longer looked human, but like a shifting kaleidoscope of colors and geometric forms. I saw the whole room was changing in this way, and I felt my stomach lurch as the room spun and tipped on its axis. The colorful furniture crashed against the ceiling loudly as we fell with it, upwards. The old man stayed planted where he was, but his kaleidoscope face didn't stop staring at us, following us as we fell. We dropped suddenly and sickeningly downward into his giant, gaping maw. The blackness swallowed us both. "Close the gateway," I heard as I fell into oblivion. I woke up in a hospital where I had been in the ICU for 2 weeks, they told me. They had given me 16 units of blood over the course of my stay. The nightmares came back to me slowly, as the nurses told me bits and pieces of horrifying information about the delirium I had been in. Images flashed before my eyes of teeth tearing pieces of flesh from my legs as I kicked and screamed. A pack of wolf-like creatures attacking me from all angles, ripping off pieces of flesh like morsels from a leftover chicken carcass while I swatted at them ineffectually with bleeding, mangled hands. All dreams, of course, except dreams don't have teeth. They said I had come in with deep gashes on my back, which no one could determine the source of. A bear was proposed and settled upon after some trepidation. Attacked by a bear was the unofficial diagnosis in the trauma unit when I was transferred up there from the intensive care unit. What they couldn't explain were the new wounds which began to open up on me as the weeks went by. I would sleep and scream, not much else. They would find new wounds and at first logically assumed I had done it to myself, but then when they put me in restraints and it continued to happen, they realized that couldn't be it. Careless nursing staff was then blamed for the myriad of cuts and gashes which developed as I slept. As one honest nurse reported, a wound had opened up before her eyes as she changed the soiled diaper in which I slept. They put me in a private room with HD surveillance cameras, with the approval of my family, who were also concerned where the wounds were coming from. That was when they began to investigate potential flesh-eating diseases like necrotizing fasciitis. These were ruled out as well, and eventually I stopped sleeping so much and the wounds became less frequent. I would lie in the bed terrified, my eyes wide and afraid when the nurses would come in to do their rounds throughout the night. They thought I was catatonic, but the CTs and MRIs showed nothing wrong with my brain. Finally, I began to come out of my stupor and started answering questions appropriately, remembering my life in bits and pieces as hopeful nurses asked me what I could recall. Nothing from the last couple weeks would come back to me, though. I just knew when I thought about falling asleep I was terrified. My legs would turn to gelatin and my skin would turn ice cold. My blood pressure would skyrocket and the heart monitor I wore would begin to beep alarmingly. I started texting Lester when I got my phone back, and he didn't respond at first. A couple of days went by and he finally texted back. It turned out he was in the other room on the same floor of the hospital, on the trauma unit. We would both be in there for a while. "We need to close the gateway," was what his text said to me. At least he was finally coming to his senses.